Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's Brian and Jim here with DrinkABeerandPlayAGame, and today we're checking out one of Jim's favorite games, Star Fox 64 for the N64. Let's get into it.
Released in 1997, this was developed by Nintendo and published by Nintendo. Hey, that was easy. Anyway, like Brian said, this is actually my favorite game of all time. In Australia and in Europe, it's known as Lilac Wars for some reason. There is some kind of sci-fi thingy, something or other called Star Fox already, so copyright. Well, either way, they got screwed over with the dumb name. But it's basically a remake slash reboot slash sequel of the original game on the Super NES. Jim, what do you want?
What's a sequel?
Look, I'm a little too goddamn giddy, alright?
God, just so happy to talk about this game.
Why, it sucks.
Always a dick. Anyway, let's just get into it.
The graphics. So, Jim and I might disagree on a lot of things regarding the N64, but we can come to terms with the fact that games don't exactly look great, even for the time. Now, granted, we will say, when we compare games, we always compare them to similar games at the time. So, keeping that in mind, that's compared to other N64 games, this looks pretty solid. The most impressive part of this game has to be the fact that you can be moving fairly fast with a lot of enemies on the screen, and there's zero frame rate drop. Obviously, that always was one of the advantages of the N64. And as far as the actual 3D polygon models themselves, there's some decent amount of detail. Each of the ships has the most detail. Your backgrounds and the actual maps, they don't really look so good. They look pretty repeated, and if you do get the time to slow down and really look at them, they're kind of blurry. Not going to give it too much fault, because why put too much effort into something you're just going to fly by? The actual enemies in-game, they all kind of look cartoony, but they've put some decent detail into them. The other thing I really was impressed with was the explosions and just the constant, lasers being shot, electricity, lightning, all the little caveats and touches. Even when you do the spin move in the game, there's a nice little graphic that goes around your ship, so it's just eye candy as you're flying around. Might not be perfect, but it's well above average in our eyes. So for all those...
Right.
Yes?
You forgot to mention how the draw distance is actually pretty good for not only an N64 game, but for an early game in the system's life.
Yeah, see, that's where me and you differ. It's not that good.
Oh, you son of a bitch.
I mean...
It's way better than a lot of games.
I mean, let's face facts, Jim. It's blur from a distance, but it shows that distance, and then you get up close and it's still blur. So, yeah. I think one of the reasons, at least for me personally, why I couldn't give this game much higher, the bosses in games like this are usually a really big selling point for me, and honestly, the designs didn't really blow my balls away. And for the reasons I said, as far as the backgrounds being blurry, yeah, the bosses. What's the final boss, Jim? It's a giant
monkey head.
Yeah, it's
that
a
turns
head.
into a brain.
Yeah, it's a head. It's a brain.
Right, you get like a lava monster and like a sand monster and like a long train.
Whatever. Either way.
I hate you.
Either way, just the general design of the things, it just wasn't as appealing to me. Like I said, Jim and I, we still gave it the same score, but that's my reasoning. And as far as beer, I'm going to give 2. 1, for Jim, obviously going to try and overcompensate for this game. And 2...
I gave it the same score.
And 2, for the blurriness. The sound. So this is the first area where Jim and I differ, but luckily, it's not by much. I will give this game credit right off the bat. The voice acting, at least the voices in general, come through fairly clear. Even if you do have to deal with the goddamn annoying-ass Slippy all the time bitching about something, kind of like Jim.
Brian, this guy's on me! Get him off me!
You're used to having guys on you, aren't you, Jim?
Brian, he's always on my tail!
I bet. But other than that, let me just run down. The music itself, it's kind of that typical Nintendo orchestral style that you're used to. What I will say is, it seems like there was really good composition, but for whatever reason, like most games on the N64, the sound itself seems a little muffled. I do like the variety of music they give you. Some of them tend to be a little bit more high-paced, I'll say, and then others have that kind of eerie sound to it. So I like the variety there. And the sound effects, there's not a ton of variety. You will have some different sounds between your regular lasers, your smart bombs, your missiles, but for the most part, your enemy sounds are going to be similar. And the one area that really drove my score to be lower than Jim's, honestly, is the constant interruptions you'll get to that music that you may appreciate with the radio calls. Like I said, the voice acting, it's pretty terrible, but at least it's fairly decent quality. But that radio squawk just annoyed the shit out of me. I know. Go ahead, overcompensate for it.
It's part of the charm of the game.
No,
it's
that's
the
not charming.
Between the characters.
That's not charming at all. They could have. They could have just had them come in and talk. They didn't need to do that goddamn annoying radio call.
But right, they're in ships. They can't just talk.
It's the future, right? There's a goddamn flying falcon that can talk. I think they can figure out, chatterless radios. Yeah. See? Perfect logic. Brian 1, Jim -10. So anyway, when it comes to scores, Jim gave it an 8, I gave it a 7. And as far as beer, I'm definitely giving it at least 2 beers. One for goddamn Slippy, being one of the most annoying voice characters ever, and the other one for that radio squawk.
Alright, when it comes to control, it's actually one of those games that holds up pretty damn well for the N64. And that's saying a lot because a lot of the control schemes, oh boy. Flying around's pretty basic, it's a rail shooter, so it's not like you're going to have to worry about accelerating yourself the whole time. It does it itself. You use the A button to shoot, the B button to use bombs, then you have the C buttons, which do a lot, so it can go between just simple braking and accelerating, and you can also do somersaults and all those kind of moves.
Hey, wait, Jim.
What?
Maybe that's why I never knew you could brake in that game, because I never used those goddamn terrible C buttons.
No wonder you suck at the game, because you never played the game the right way.
Hey, Jim, remember, I think we gotta inform the people, the very first time I picked up that game, I beat it, and almost record time, and the first time you played it, you didn't even beat it. It took you a while.
I was 11.
I mean, if that's the excuse you want to use, I'm just saying, clearly I'm better at this game than you.
Anyway. So besides that, you have the shoulder buttons, which you can use to bank and roll and do your barrel rolls. It really does a good job of using the entire controller to its fullest. Also, the original run of the game came with the Rumble Pack, which for its time was revolutionary. It doesn't really matter in the whole grand scheme of things with control, but it was cool to have that force feedback with everything you did, even if it did chew up AAA batteries. But besides that, it's just an impressive and nearly flawless control scheme. I couldn't say that it's 100% completely perfect. Maybe you could have used some kind of voice commands or some shit with your other co-pilots with the D-pad and used something with that, but as it is, I love it. I gave it a 9. Brian gave it an 8. And when it comes to beer, you really don't need any, so I'm going to say no beer. The gameplay. So, this game, like I said before, it's kind of a sequel / reboot of the original Star Fox. So what you do is you have a whole shitload of planets that you can go through, and you basically go through the same number of rounds every time until you get to the final planet of Venom to fight Andros. How you get there, completely up to you. And the pathways you take there, pretty much also up to you. You have the easier planets on the right-hand side, and the hardest are all on the left. Some planets you need to do certain different milestones, like, say, numbers of kills, or protecting things, or going through a certain amount of obstacles, in order to unlock the pathways to something else. So there's actually a lot of gameplay here in a surprisingly small package. You can beat through a play session of the game in between a half hour and a 45 minutes tops, depending on how good you are. But honestly, the real bulk of the gameplay comes just in the solid flight controls, the great combat. It has the addition of all range mode, which really opens up the fighting for a lot of the boss fights and certain levels itself. And really just going through all the special stages, all through the different pathways, trying to just go back and get the high score. Let's face it, it kind of keeps that arcadey feel where it keeps the total number of enemies that you down. So my personal favorite thing about it, though, is just the super tight control that goes with the super tight gunplay, and it's just a great sit down, turn your brain off for the most part kind of time that you can't help but have fun with. Overall, it's just a super fun game. It can be as brainless as you want, or you can really get involved in it. It's completely up to the player. You have so much choice in it, so I gave it a 9. Brian gave it an 8.
Why did I make it perfect? Maybe it could have had a little more variation in the levels. Maybe it could have used the submarine and the tank more instead of all the R-Wing levels, but minor gripes aside, it's a fantastic time. And again, I don't really think you need a beer, but I'll just give it one happy beer for having the different vehicles.
The Originality. Don't want to beat a broken record, but Jim already mentioned this is a sequel/remake. Plus, there's been a ton of other rail shooters that we've seen before. So while the game may not offer anything mechanically new to the genre, it did offer some new modes and vehicles to the Star Fox series itself that Jim already mentioned. But there is one area where we can at least give it some solid points, and Jim already touched on that as well. This was the first game to use a rumble pack, and that felt really original. Nowadays, it's not as important, and while it might not do much, it definitely gave you a different feel while flying that ship around. So for that alone, and the added modes and the new vehicles, we both gave it 3s. We couldn't give it much more because, like we said, we've had this experience with games before, but this just added just a few little things that made it feel like a unique experience. And when it comes to beer, I'm not going to add any. The fact that this is the first game to utilize a rumble pack was pretty damn cool.
When it comes to replayability, there's actually a decent amount here. So, like I already said, you have all the different planets and you have all the different pathways you can take. Not only that, but you can also try and set new high scores for yourself, which I did about 1,000 times as a kid. If you get all the medals, like I said, you can unlock expert mode. So the game also has a multiplayer mode. Granted, it kind of feels a little tacked on. You only start off with 2 maps, and if you get all the medals in expert, you get a 3rd map where instead of being in a vehicle, you're outside of the vehicle as the animals running around trying to shoot each other. I can't really say that the multiplayer is the most fun thing in the world. It's a lot better if you have 4 players, but one-on-one, oh boy. So anyway, we both gave it 7s. And when it comes to beer, I'm gonna give it 2 beers. One for having all the replayability options, and one for being to run around as a cute little fox or a bunny or a frog and shoot each other with bazookas. Ow.
God damn it, Jim.
Ow.
You know what? I'm changing all my scores to 1s just because of that.
So, overall, this is just a game that I truly, truly love. And for the most part, it just flip-flops back and forth with Streets of Rage 2 is my favorite game of all time. Though this has had about a 4-year run at number top for me, so, hey, there you go. It's just one of those games that just... It wasn't even a game I played that much in my childhood. I never touched a rail shooter back then. And then I got in the mail that promo VHS tape for this, and I was like, holy crap, this game looks amazing. So, I rented it at my uncle's one weekend, got my ass kicked, but just had that little fire in me, so I was eventually able to get my parents to buy it for me, and I played it, and played it, and played it, and played it. I'm not joking when I say I've played through this game at least a couple hundred times. I've unlocked every single thing. I even deleted all my save data and went back and did it all again just for shits and giggles. So this is just a game that's near and dear to my heart. I know that I could be a little too forgiving in some areas, maybe a little too critical in others when it comes to this one, but I'm trying to be as fair as I can with this game. Granted, it's the N64, it's not perfect, but when it comes to a game on the console that has staying power, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a game that does as much as this one. Blabbering aside, it's a fantastic game. If you have an N64, it should definitely be in your library. It's not that expensive, and it's just a fun time. So, we both gave it 8s. What can I say? It's a must-play for the system. Brian, do you have anything to say?
When I first played this game, it was only a couple years ago. It was at Jim's. I knew this was his favorite game, so I was curious to see if it was worth all the hype. And I gotta be honest, it is a fun, mindless shooter for me. Obviously, I don't have the deep experience Jim had. I didn't play through it multiple times. Played through it once, but it's very easy to pick up and play and just, okay, I beat it. I can understand how deep it can be for some people, and if you're trying to get all the medals or whatnot. So if you do need something that has really good control, and you just want to shoot some shit out of the air, this is probably one of your best bets on the N64. So with that being said, when we combine all of our scores together, it rounds out to a 7.8. Well above average, and for those of you who know how we score, that's still a pretty goddamn high score in our opinion. I'm sure Jim...
Originality.
I'm sure Jim wishes it was higher. But
damn technicalities.
But we're fair against all games we choose. So be happy it's that high, Jim.
Begrudgingly.
When it comes to beer pairing, Knowing that this is a special game for Jim, I wanted to pick a really unique beer, so I went with the Four Legs Good from Santee Adarius Rustic Ales. This is their 9.9% quad, and it is damn delicious. If you're lucky enough to find a bottle, pick it up. Plus, I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty inspired by the fact that there's a little flying fox on the label, so that helped me pick this beer as well. But remember to drink your beers and play your games responsibly. As always, guys, thanks for checking out this video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you give us a thumbs up, leave some comments, or better yet, why not subscribe? Till next time, guys, cheers.